I learned something about power the day 2 envelopes arrived on my doorstep, one in thick linen with my grandparents' initials pressed into the flap, the other thin, off-white, with my parents' handwriting crowding the address like it was trying to get there first. Power doesn't shout. It chooses a line in a document, points at it, and waits. My name is Mark, 31, quiet on purpose, the one who always took pictures at family weddings so I didn't have to be in them. When my grandparents died, the attorney handed me a binder and said, "They planned for everything." Inside was a trust, neat as a blueprint, with a sum I could barely say out loud, $30 million in diversified assets, income to me, principal at the trustee's discretion, governed by sections that sounded like the opposite of stories. Distribution standards, spendthrift, no contest, independent trustee. The same afternoon, my parents texted, "We should talk tonight. Family only." Before I go on, do one simple thing for me. If stories of quiet proof and clean justice speak to you, subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who needs the reminder that facts win louder than fury. I met my parents at their kitchen table, the same oak surface where I learned multiplication and how to lie politely about Brussels sprouts. Mom poured coffee like it was stage lighting. Dad slid a folder toward me and said, "We're going to help you steward this windfall." The folder held a family management agreement. Already filled in my name, my parents as co-managers, sweeping powers to allocate capital, an advisory fee, commensurate with industry standards, and an irrevocable proxy over votable interests. I closed the folder. "I have a trustee," I said. Dad smiled the way men smile when they believe the paperwork is a formality. "Honey, trustees are for people who don't have family." I didn't debate. I went home, opened the binder my grandparents left, and read as if the future were somewhere in the footnotes. It was Section 5.3. All distributions shall be within the sole and absolute discretion of the independent trustee. Section 7.1. Spendthrift Clause. No beneficiary shall have the right to anticipate, alienate, or assign his or her interests. Said interests shall not be subject to creditors or claims. Section 9.2. No contest. Any person who directly or indirectly challenges, seeks to control, or interferes with the administration of this trust shall forfeit any interest hereunder. The trustee was a woman named Reena Patel, a fiduciary who wrote emails like instructions on the back of a safety diagram, calm, plain, exact. She had already sent me a welcome letter, 3 pages, ending with, "My role is to say no to anything that would make your grandparents' intent smaller than it was." My parents called every day that week. Day 1. "It's too much responsibility for you alone." Day 2. "Family wealth should be family managed." Day 3. "We can just move assets into more favorable vehicles. The market is the market." I answered the same way each time. The trust governs. On day 4 they tried a memory. When I was 13 and broke my wrist, Dad drove all night to pick me up from camp. Mom kept her hand on my knee the whole way to the ER, counting my breaths out loud until mine matched hers. I remember. Love is not a power of attorney. The calls turned into a dinner, which turned into statements that tried on the tone of kindness like it was a size too small. "You wouldn't even have this without us," Dad said. "We introduced you to them. Give us the login to the trustee portal," Mom said softly, like asking for a pinch of salt. "We'll help." I brought 2 things to that dinner, the binder, and a promise to only say things I could put in an affidavit later. When I got home, a new email from Reena was waiting. "Your parents have requested copies of the trust and statements. Because they are not beneficiaries, remainder persons, co-trustees, or otherwise entitled parties, I will not provide them. Please forward any attempted interference." I slept for the first time in a week. The next morning I found a message on my voicemail from a realtor I didn't know, cheerful as a mismatched ringtone. "Excited to discuss a potential listing of your grandparents' vacation property in Door County. Your mother said you'd loop me in." I called Reena. She responded with 3 bullet points and a line that felt like a guardrail. 1. No asset sales requested by non-fiduciaries. 2. all communications consolidated through our office. 3. If this escalates, the no contest clause can be invoked. The realtor emailed again, CCING my parents, CCING a buyer's agent, CCING luck. I did not reply. Rena did, with a sentence that ended the thread. The property is titled to the trust. Any solicitations should cease. Further outreach may be treated as interference under Section 9.2. 10 minutes later, Dad called. Do you understand what you're throwing away? He said. We have relationships. We can make this grow. We can make you safe. I am safe. I said. That's what the trust is for. You're choosing a stranger over your parents. I'm choosing the intent of the people who earned it over the wants of the people who didn't. That night a courier delivered an envelope with my name typed in a courier font my father has always believed equals gravitas. Inside was an assignment of beneficial interest. They had drafted, with a space for my signature, and there's already signed. We'll hold it for you. Dad had written in the margin. I didn't sign. I asked Rena to document receipt and to send a formal response. She sent a letter that began, Please cease and desist, and ended, Any further actions may trigger the no contest provision. Counsel has been notified. The next day my parents filed a petition in probate court for instructions regarding administration, alleging that I was unduly influenced by a corporate trustee, that my grandparents had intended a family-led approach, and that the trustee should be compelled to cooperate with parental advisory management. They attached a clipped line from an old Thanksgiving toast of my grandfather's. Family should always look out for family. As if the word, look, could be transmuted into control. Rena retained counsel. I met our lawyer, a woman whose eyes made people stand up a little straighter. We will be boring, she said. We will present the document, the parties, and the intent as expressed in the text. We will not argue feelings when the text provides facts. The hearing was set for a Tuesday, a day I've always trusted because it feels like work. In the hallway, my mother hugged me with only her shoulder, which is how people hug someone they're trying to manage. My father looked past me at Rena as if he could speak directly into her job and rearrange it. In the courtroom, their attorney spoke first. He painted a picture where I was immature with assets, and my parents were seasoned stewards. He said words like legacy and family values, with the cadence of a commercial. Then he asked the court to order the trustee to share all statements, to consult my parents before any distribution or investment, and to treat their advisory fee as customary for family offices. Our counsel stood and did not posture. Your Honor, the trust is unambiguous. The independent trustee holds sole discretion. Spendthrift language bars assignment. The no contest clause provides consequences for interference. Petitioners are neither beneficiaries nor fiduciaries. Their requested relief would rewrite the instrument. She introduced the trust into evidence, highlighted sections 5.3, 7.1, 9.2, and the page where my grandparents initialed each clause. She submitted Rena's certifications, the realtor emails, the assignment they sent me, and the courier log. I testified to the pressure, the folder, the calls, the dinner. I did not testify to betrayal. I testified to facts. Their counsel cross-examined Rena about whether she would consider parental input. I will consider anything consistent with my duties, she said, but I will not accept direction from non-fiduciaries. He tried to needle ambiguity into the word discretion. She didn't move. Then the judge leaned back, removed his glasses, and asked the one clean question that stopped everything like a hand on a bell. Who holds discretion to distribute under Section 5.3, the beneficiary, the parents, or the independent trustee? He looked at my parents when he said, parents. Not to insult them, but to locate them. The independent trustee, our counsel said. And who may assign a beneficial interest under the spendthrift clause? No one, she said. And who triggers the no contest clause? Anyone who interferes with administration. He put his glasses back on. Then the answer appears in the instrument. he said. He dismissed the petition, declined to compel the trustee, and granted our motion for fees. He added, almost kindly, "This is not a forum for rewriting the dead." Outside the courtroom, Dad said, "You did this to us." I said, "Grandma and Grandpa did this for me." Mom cried the kind of tears that make a person's face a weapon. I didn't answer tears with a speech. I walked to the street where buses exhaled and people with lives unconnected to mine obeyed the crosswalk lights. I went home, made rice, and wrote a letter to my grandparents I would never send. It thanked them for choosing a structure that values quiet over flattery. It promised to never turn the trust into a performance. The next weeks were made of small, strong things. Rena set up a conservative distribution schedule and a quarterly review. We hired a tax counsel who speaks in verbs. I met with a planner whose favorite word is enough. I kept the same apartment. I replaced the cracked screen on my phone. I bought shoes that fit. I let the number 30 million become what it is when you don't try to wear it, an engine, not a costume. My parents tried again at Thanksgiving. "We'll keep it simple," Dad said, sliding another folder toward me with a tab labeled Philanthropy. Inside were drafts establishing a foundation with my name, my parents as co-chairs, and an initial gift of no less than $8 million. "You'll look generous," Mom said. "It will make you safe." "I'm already safe," I said. "That's what boundaries do," I told Rena. She sent another letter. My parents went quiet for a month, long enough for me to believe silence could be a bridge. Then a check arrived from them addressed to me for $2,500, memo line. Early distribution management retainer. I returned it with a note that said only uncashed. They called the next day. "Why are you punishing us?" Mom said. "I am not punishing you," I said. "I am obeying the only people in the room who aren't here to argue anymore." My father said. "We made you." For the first time in this whole war, I let a sentence come out before I waited. "You raised me. They trusted me." Then I hung up and cried in the laundry room where no one could hear the washing machine clap its hands like an audience. In January, a letter arrived from a lawyer my parents had hired in another county, petitioning again, this time with different words. For constructive trust, and unjust enrichment, and equitable relief. Our counsel responded with the same calm the ocean shows a rock. Denied. The court set another hearing. On the morning of, the judge, different bench, same furniture, asked the only question that mattered on that page. Who funded this trust? The grandparents. Counsel said. Whose intent controls? The settlers. Is there any provision granting the parents advisory control? No, then I see no equity to grant. He dismissed. He warned about sanctions if this continued. My parents left before I did, the way people leave a room when they're sure it will change if they go first. That night I stood in my grandparents' old kitchen, the place I could now visit without asking anyone for a key because a clause in a document said I could. I ran my hand along the groove in the counter where my grandmother chopped apples every October for pies in a freezer labeled with tape, October, apple, love. I said thank you out loud to no one. Then I called Rena and asked her to help me set up a scholarship in my grandparents' names for kids who are the first in their family to go to college and for whom the word endowment sounds like an aquarium exhibit. We built it carefully, independent board, distributions per written policy, no involvement from anyone who could turn it into a holiday card brag. I didn't tell my parents about it. Some good things don't need to be a fight. Spring arrived as if it had been practicing all winter. I started running again, slowly, like I was dictating a letter to my own lungs. My parents sent a text on my birthday. Come for dinner. We just want to be with you. I went. There was no folder on the table, which felt like a reprieve. We ate salmon and green beans. We talked about a movie we all pretended to have liked. Then Mom said, "We just want to look. Not control." Dad said, "Copy us on quarterly reports." I said, "No." Dad's voice spiked. "Do you love us?" He demanded, as if love could be entered into evidence. I said. Yes. Because it's true. Then prove it, he said. I stood up and put my napkin on the table. I said, by not letting money make us worse. When I reached the door, Mom said my name the way she did when I was 5, and she wanted me to stop before I stepped into the street. I stopped. We're getting older, she said. So am I said. But I'm not going to practice the kind of adulthood that turns other people's signatures into props. Summer brought something I hadn't planned on, relief that didn't feel like victory. I learned how to say no without rehearsing it. I learned how to let silence do a kind of bookkeeping speeches can't. Once, in the grocery store, I saw a man pocket a small, expensive bottle of vanilla, and I felt a kind of sympathy that made me put cash in the help fund by the register and walk out with beans and rice and the knowledge that not every theft is about greed, some are about weather. Money doesn't fix weather, it buys a roof. The trust kept doing what good structures do, boring things well. Investment committee minutes read like instructions for how not to ruin a day. Distributions arrived when they were supposed to. I started volunteering where no one knows my last name. I fixed a fence at my grandparents' place and found a jar of screws my grandfather had labeled. Someday. Someday happens when a person writes it down. In the fall, my parents filed nothing. They sent a text with a photo of a leaf and a caption that said, "Remember raking?" I wrote back, "Yes." We raked together in October. We didn't talk about the trust. We bagged leaves. We drank cider. We did not solve our lives. But we didn't make them worse. A week later, my mother asked if she could see the kitchen at my grandparents' one last time. I said yes and met her there with a clockmaker's gentleness. She ran her hand along the same groove in the counter and said, "Her knife did that." I said, "I know." She cried in a way that had no audience. "I thought this money would make us more," she said. "It made us magnified," I said. "That's what money does." She looked at me the way someone looks at a version of themselves they thought they'd left in a drawer. "I don't know how to be in your life if I'm not necessary. Be in it because you're mine," I said. "Not because you're needed." It was not a fix. It was a line. Winter returned, and with it a letter from the first judge, the one who asked the clean question. It was just a notice about fees and final entries. But at the bottom he had written, maybe without thinking, maybe because he had a pen and an extra inch of paper, "The instrument speaks where we cannot." I taped that line inside the binder. It felt like something a person should see every time they want to be louder than a document that outlives them. If you're listening because someone demanded what was yours to steward and called it love, here is what I learned. Do not fight on the field of feelings when the text is your terrain. Read the instrument. Find the clause that tells the truth without your mouth. Document everything. Forward attempts at interference to the person whose job it is to be boring. Do not let a dinner become a deposition with worse lighting. Ask the clean question out loud if you must. Who holds discretion? Then let the answer do its work. My parents demanded $30 million. I brought the trust. The judge asked who held discretion. The instrument answered. And I went back to a small life I'm learning to love, a life where money is a quiet engine, where the scholarships go out on time, where rice tastes like relief, where I say my grandparents' names sometimes to an empty room so they can be witnesses to the fact that their plan worked, and where, when someone tries to use the word family as a lever, I put my hand on the binder, breathe, and remember that the strongest love my grandparents ever gave me was not a number, it was a sentence that keeps me from being owned.